And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote for tonight. Someone who knew the Sheikh, who spent time with the Sheikh, who discussed with the Sheikh, and who also presented and produced a series of memoirs in which the Sheikh spoke about his life and times. Please welcome Dr. Azzam Tamimi.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله ومن والاه. Of course, people usually in these circumstances say we are sad, we are losing a giant, a unique phenomenon of our generation. Actually, we expected Sheikh Qaradawi was going to leave us anytime. He's been sick for a couple of years, at least since he caught COVID. And the past 2 years of his life, he wasn't really well. But yet, for every one of us, his departure is painful in certain ways. Because he means something to every one of us. I mean, for me specifically, I consider myself, and this is what people used to call us in the 70s. I'm talking about 50 years ago now. We are the children of the awakening, of the Sahwa. The Sahwa that started in the Arab world after the 1967 defeat of the Arabs. That Sahwa was the product of a handful number of individuals in the region. People whose books we read, whose lectures we attended, whose analysis we learned, and upon whose heritage we continue to build. And one of these was Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi. I remember when I first started frequenting the mosque regularly at the age of 13 or 14, the first book ever I read for him and was among the first ever to read was Al-Halal wal-Haram fil Islam. My family was a Nasrist family. A family that thought the Muslim Brotherhood was evil. That if you went to the mosque regularly, there was something wrong with you. Despite that, somehow Allah guided me through the efforts of someone, may Allah reward him, and I went to the mosque. And when I went to the mosque, I remained in the mosque. And I lived with people I never met. From Hassan al-Banna to Sayyid Qutb to Abu al-A'la al-Mawdudi to Qaradawi to Sayyid Sabiq to Muhammad al-Ghazali. People I discovered, each one of them produced a treasure that was only waiting for someone like me to go and recognize what Islam is about. Yes, we were born as Muslims. We thought we were Muslim. I dare say, we thought we were Muslim. I discovered at the age of 13 or 14 that I knew very little about Islam. Apart from the fact that we had a copy of the Mus'haf somewhere on a shelf, and apart from the fact that my mother occasionally prayed in front of me and probably made a dua for me, there was no Islam in our house. I ran to the mosque, and the mosque was my refuge. And the books of Sheikh Qaradawi and of that generation of revivalists became my nutrition, became my oxygen, like many of the children of my generation. That's why for me the death of Sheikh Qaradawi means an end of an era. MashaAllah, 96 years old. MashaAllah, plentiful of years. And a lot of good work. Definitely, nobody can deny that. Whether you like him or you hate him. And those who hate him, I regret to say, hate him because they don't know him or they never knew him properly. You cannot deny, whether you like him or hate him, that he left a huge treasure of knowledge behind. I was privileged in 2016 to record with Sheikh Qaradawi 30 hours about his life. They're already on YouTube. They are in Arabic, I regret. They haven't been translated yet. But right from the start, right from the beginning of his life, from talking about his mother, and by the way, occasionally he was emotional and he shed a tear or two, but on 3 occasions he wept. And I even wept with him. On 3 occasions he wept. The first, when he remembered his mother. And he said to me, had it not been for the dua of my mother, I would not have achieved any of this. What did his mother say to him? His mother was a villager, a very simple villager. She made the dua for him, may Allah put sweetness in your mouth. Imagine. May Allah put sweetness in your mouth and make the stones everywhere pleased with you, and even those that are in the heavens. He said to me, look at me. Alhamdulillah, I have achieved a lot. But it's because my mother was pleased with me. And he wept. The second time he wept was when he remembered as they were being taken in a prisoner's truck from a local police station to Sinai. This was in 1949. The truck stopped on the way. It's a prisoner's van, stopped on the way, and they heard someone shout outside, a newspaper seller shouting, read in today's news, Hassan al-Banna is killed, Hassan al-Banna is assassinated. And he said, we started weeping. He and his brothers, the Muslim brothers, as the brother has said, he became acquainted with Hassan al-Turabi at the age of 13. Hassan al-Banna. He became acquainted with Hassan al-Banna at the age of 13. He was at the primary level at Al-Azhar. His cousin was with him. They said, we're going to hear Hassan al-Banna. He is in town today. And he said to them, I'll go with you. He went with them. Then they laughed at him because he was a young boy. When they returned, they said to him, what did he talk about? He repeated to them the exact speech that Hassan al-Banna gave about Hijrah. Word for word. And it was the moment he fell in love with him. So when he heard that he had been assassinated, it was a huge shock that fell on his heart. He was imprisoned in Sinai for a number of years. For a number of months. And then he was imprisoned again in the mid-50s under Jamal Abdel Nasser. So when he heard that Hassan al-Banna was assassinated, he wept. The third time he wept was when he remembered on one evening in the prison in Cairo. It's called the Sijn al-Harbi, the military prison. For some reason, the prison management decided to allow them to pray Jama'ah for the first time. They hadn't been allowed to pray Jama'ah before. So they all went down to the hall, introduced Sheikh Qaradawi to pray Maghrib. And he prayed and recited in the first rak'ah, the last verses of Surah Ali Imran. And he said he couldn't but cry. And he kept crying, and they kept crying behind him until he gave salam, until he ended the prayer. This is what made Sheikh Qaradawi a unique phenomenon. Not just a scholar and an activist. And an activist not for a locality, not for a village, not for a town, and not even for a country. An activist for the ummah and for the entire ummah. And that's why whoever invited him from Australia to New Zealand, to North America, to Canada, to South Africa, to anywhere in Africa or Asia or in the Arab region, if he could go, he'd go. And people will remember him. And you will hear hundreds of thousands, if not millions of stories from people who somehow met him or knew him or heard about him or read him. Now, let me conclude by connecting all of this to the sunnah of revivalism that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala left us with in order for this ummah to continue. and for the deen to be preserved. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. It's not me or you or her or him who preserve this deen. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who preserves this deen. But He preserves this deen through soldiers. وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُ. Through His own troops. And you can choose whether to be one of those troops or to leave that honor to somebody else. Sheikh Qaradawi chose right from day number one to be among the troops of Allah in this process of revival. I mean, imagine when I tell you that as I grew up as a child, later on I realized that there was no Islam in my house, and my grandfather was an Azhari Sheikh. Can you imagine? I mean, there was a gap in the lives of our people. That's why we lost Palestine. That's why we live in misery. That's why we went through so much hardship, because we left Islam behind. Now, once we start coming back to Islam, that's called revival. And who leads that revival? It's people like Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi. It's people like Sheikh Muhammad al-Ghazali, whom he loved so much and considered to be his ustaz. It's people like Sayyid Sabiq. It's people like Hassan al-Banna. It's people like Sayyid Qutb. It's people like al-Mawdudi and many, many others. Some we know, some we don't know. Those who live their lives for Allah. I conclude by quoting Sheikh Qaradawi on something very important. He said there are two types of bad scholars. Of course, there are good scholars, we know. Of course, we need them. They help us. They are our teachers. They guide us. But there are two types of bad scholars. No wonder on the Day of Judgment, there will be a scholar who will be thrown into the fire. Just as there will be a shaheed who will be thrown into the fire. Wal'iyadu billah. Or someone, a philanthropist who will be thrown into the fire. Wal'iyadu billah. Who are these two scholars who are considered to be bad or not that good or not recommended, to say the least? One, ulama al-sultan. People who dedicate their knowledge to please the ruler. Whatever the ruler wants to hear from them, they give him a fatwa, an idea. Today it can be permissible, tomorrow it will be prohibited if you wish, Your Highness. If Your Majesty would like, yesterday the women couldn't drive cars, today they can drive cars. If you like, yesterday having a dancing party near Medina is haram, today it becomes a sport. Why not? These are the ulama of the Sultan. Yet he said the more dangerous type of ulama are the populist ulama. Ulama who think that their fame can be achieved by telling the ordinary people who actually need their knowledge, who lack the knowledge, tell them what they like to hear. And these kind of scholars can misguide millions of people. I bear testimony before you, and I bear testimony before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Sheikh Qaradawi was a scholar for Allah, was a scholar for the ummah. I say this making dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may accept him with the prophets and the martyrs and the righteous and the saints. But also because I was so close to him throughout the past 20 years at least. أسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى أن يتقبله في الصالحين وأن يغفر له ويرحمه وأن يمكننا من أن نظل على العهد. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we remain loyal to this path, the path of da'wah. جزاكم الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.